Welcome everyone to another Motivation Monday interview. I'm here with Dr. Katie Muenks. She is an assistant professor at the University of Texas at Austin. Welcome, Katie.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Thank you. So we're going to just jump right in. Our first question is, where have you in the past heard about grant opportunities?
So there's not always a centralized place to hear about all possible grant opportunities. I would recommend, first of all, just joining the listservs of all the professional organizations that you are a part of or that are related to your topic of interest. Keep up to date on any emails that you're getting from your department or your college or university, because sometimes they will send out kind of calls for various grants. Um, if your department has any grant resources, or again, your college or university, you can, kind of do that. A lot of research oriented universities also have grant offices, and their whole job is basically to help people find grant opportunities. So that would be a great place to look for opportunities as well. You can also, I heard about a lot of the grants that I found out just kind of through word of mouth or through emails or sort of connections that I had through professional organizations that I was a part of. But you can also think about, what are the classic kind of agencies in your field? And this could be something that you could ask your advisor or other, mentors or professors in your institution.
This is maybe a meatier question. What was the most challenging part of getting your first grant or a fellowship? And how did you overcome or rise to meet this challenge?
So for me, it's always thinking of the idea. That is the hardest part. I think that's probably a lot of people's hardest part, because I think when writing a grant, you really do have to think about not only obviously your own research and your ideas and the things you're interested in, but also the priorities of the funding agency that you're applying for. So you want to make sure that your idea is in line with the types of things that they fund and the things that they are looking to fund. And then the other thing is the scope. So making sure that the scope is appropriate, so it's not too big of a project or too small of a project for the grant that you're applying for. And of course, there's larger grants and then there's smaller grants, right? So this can really, really vary. I would say my advice or how I overcame that is I think this is going to be a common theme throughout this interview, is like giving yourself time. So giving yourself enough time to read the literature, to deeply think about what you want to do, where there are important gaps that really need to be filled, and that you feel that you could make a good argument for why it's important and why you're the right person to do that work. And just giving yourself opportunities. Like I definitely wrote just some random ideas, got a lot of feedback, changed those ideas over time. I think being open-minded to feedback from others of like,
If you have any recommendations for some really good resources or anything that you found helpful in the past that might help graduate students that are aiming for a research grant or a fellowship.
I think the number one resource, or the number one thing that would be helpful is if you can find somebody else who got the grant that you're applying for and get their materials. So, and I think that is something that you could potentially find through mechanisms like the Motivation SIG or other like professional development programs that you're a part of. I mean, if anyone watching this wants to apply for any of the grants that I received, I'm happy to share my materials with you. So just email me. But I think that is like the number one thing that's actually super, super helpful, because you can see a successful proposal, how it was organized, what it looks like, the scope of it, all these things. I think the more specific you can get, the better in terms of those resources. The other thing I think is really useful is writing groups. So like I know the motivations that graduate students have a writing group, and there might be other writing groups that you have an opportunity to be part of, but oh no.
My next question is that we're often told about how grant writing is so different from academic writing. So I wanted to hear your thoughts about what you think are the key differences and how you approach grant writing comparatively to like writing a manuscript or anything else like that.
Yeah, first difference is that you're writing for a more general audience typically. Again, it kind of depends on the grant that you're applying for. So just as a caveat to everything I'm saying, if you are applying to especially like a larger or like a larger like education funding agency, that is going to be like, so for example, IES or NSF or those kinds of agencies, like you do have to have somewhat of a broader kind of perspective than you would for a journal article. So really contextualizing your work in kind of the big picture. And then I would say writing a grant is also you have more confident language. So I know in articles we're often kind of taught that we need to be really cautious about what conclusions we're making and really talking about our limitations and all of that. But I think when you're writing a grant, you really want to have really clear, direct, confident language, and you really want to emphasize without any hesitation why what you're doing is important and why you're the best person to do that work.
My next question is about more advice. There's these different sort of aspects to grant writing that don't always go into other types of writing, specifically a personal statement or a research statement or plan. So I was wondering if you had any advice for how to go about writing those, or if you had any issues come up that you had to circumvent, that kind of thing.
If you're thinking about people that are actually reviewing your grant, you want to make things as easy as possible for them to assess your grant. So to the extent that you can just very, very clearly stick to exactly what they're asking for. So, in the personal statement, they might say like, we want to know, how your previous experience relates to this project, or, you know, sometimes they might probably not, but they might ask about, can you talk about an experience with XYZ, or can you talk about equity and how you do that, how you experience that in your life. Like there's going to be different things that they're going to want. So I would just tailor it very closely and clearly to what they're asking for. And then the same with the research statement. I mean, sometimes they really want really specific, like we want to know exactly this, that, we want pictures, we want, or, like a plan for, conceptual plan, or all different kinds of things. So I would say just read it really carefully. And then, again, where this could be helpful is looking at previous people who have gotten the award. You can see how they talked about these things in their materials, and then just starting early and getting feedback, especially from people like professors or mentors who have some familiarity with these funding agencies, or fellowships, or agencies, or foundations, or whatever, kind of thinking about what are the things that they're going to be looking for.
All right. So last question. Now that you have a grant, or imagining that you've just gotten a grant, what advice do you have for transitioning to more quote unquote supervised research, where you're very much expected to communicate with your funding agency? Maybe not a lot of graduate students have had that experience. So any advice you have for that?
I would say, just realizing that you might need to put more kind of upfront work into the planning aspects of it, which you probably are already going to do when writing the grant, which is nice, because then you'll kind of have a timeline of what you're kind of looking at in terms of when you want to get things done. But just being a little bit more strict on those sorts of things compared to when you're just kind of doing research without a grant, where you kind of don't necessarily have as many deadlines or strict things that you need to get done by a certain time, or deliverables.
Awesome. Is there anything else that you thought of aside from the questions that you would want to share with the graduate students?
I guess one final thing is that grants are just really, really hard to get. So I just want to say, like, I have applied to many grants that I have not received, and everyone that I know who is successful at getting grants has also gotten rejected from many, many grants. They're often only funding a very small percentage of, the proposals that they get. And so I would just say, um, if you have that experience, that you're not alone, and that that's very normal, and that you shouldn't, give up on applying. Sometimes it's also a matter of fit of your project. So it's almost similar to a journal, right? If you get rejected from one journal and then another journal like loves the paper and thinks that it's perfect for that audience, that might be the same for grant writing as well, where maybe you don't get a grant from this, foundation or whatever, but then there's another foundation that project is perfect for. So I would just say, don't be discouraged if you don't succeed right away.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Katie. It's been a joy to talk to you, and I'm sure that everyone is going to really appreciate watching this. So thank you so much.
Of course, very happy to do it.